everyone, it's Jenny. Welcome back to my channel. How are you all? I hope you're having a lovely day. And I am here to do my April wrap-up. So I read 25 books in April, which is not too shabby, if I do say so myself. That is probably my best reading month, I would say, this year. So I'm going to talk about the highs and then the lows because I just feel like doing it in that order this time. Okay, in no particular order. The first book I have that I really flippin' enjoyed is The House of Mortem by Edith Wharton, which is the second novel that I've read by her. I first read Summer, which I also highly recommend, but this is definitely her probably most well-known, or along with The Age of Innocence, one of her most well-known novels, and it focuses on Lily Bart, who is a woman that, while she's living with wealthy people and trying to kind of keep up appearances, she actually has no money of her own since her father died, and it's at this point in life where she's 29, so she's kind of missed that window of like prime time where she's particularly eligible to get married. And even though she's beautiful, it's partly about the role of women in society and how marriage is such an all or nothing thing for them. And she's really interesting because she gambles, and I don't think I've ever read a classic where a woman gambled, and that was very exciting and like quite refreshing, really. But there is some scandal in this book, but it just was wonderful character building, and I really loved Lily. I thought she was so full-bodied as a character, and I felt a lot of things at the end, and that's what I'm going to say. But it's a really wonderful examination of marriage and the restrictions that women suffered from because of their expectations to get married. So very, very good. Would love to read The Age of Innocence next, or maybe Ethan Frome. Let me know what book I should read next by Edith Wharton, because I definitely want to read more by her. And then the next book is historical fiction. This is Margaret I by Danielle Dutton, which is based on the life of Margaret Cavendish, who was a real person. I think I said in my TBR that I didn't think she was, but someone commented that she was, so fantastic. And she was a woman who became Duchess of Newcastle, but this starts right at the beginning of her life, and it's kind of split into two halves. So the first half is from her own perspective, and then it becomes third person narration. I think I enjoyed the first half from her perspective slightly more. It talks about everything like from her childhood up to getting married, up to being banished from England because of the Civil War, and how even though her family were rich, they lost a lot of that, of their lands and their house and their wealth, because obviously the king lost the Civil War in England and they were royalists, so they had to leave because Cromwell was coming in. So historically it was very fascinating because I don't think I've read any book at all set during this time period. But she becomes a writer, a playwright, and that part of it was really fun, though it took a bit longer to get to that than I thought. But it was a book that I just read in one sitting, which I haven't done for ages, and it's very short, sharp chapters in the first half particularly, but very descriptive and very visual in the way that she writes. And I think this is her debut. If it's not, I would definitely love to read whatever she writes next. So that's a great read too. Then a book that is probably the one that I would recommend the most to people. This is Miss Bunkle's book by D.E. Stevenson. I recommend this because this is very underrated, because I think most Persephone classics are underrated, and this is about Miss Bunkle who, because her dividends are not, her shares are not bringing in as much money as they used to because it's set in the 30s with the Depression, she decides to write a book. And being a person of not much imagination, because she lives in a small village called Silverstream, she just decides to base her book exactly on the village and the people in the village, and lo and behold it becomes a bestseller. And obviously some people have come off in the book better than others, so you have a group of people that have a strong retaliation against the book, and there's a lot of balling about of who they think has written the book, but then also the good effects that it has, and it just changes everyone's lives, including Miss Bunkle's particularly. And it was just such a delight. And it's also one of those books that, while it seems very simple, there is quite a lot in there about loneliness and bad marriages, like abusive marriages, not necessarily like violently, but just emotional abuse, and living with people when you're not happy, and how, you know, you deserve happiness. It's very much one of those books where you feel like, I'm gonna go and change my life now. It's great fun, and I know there is a series of them actually, so I might see if I can find the other ones of that. And my only non-fiction on this list is Lucy Wellesley's Queen Victoria, Daughter, Wife, Mother, Widow, which I buddy read with Emma from a couple of books, where I will link below. She's very wonderful. I hope you go and check her out. This was wonderful because it was split, I think I said before in other videos, into a chapter with focused on one day specifically, and it was kind of in 3 parts as a book. So you had a part as a daughter, a wife, and a widow, and I thought that was very original, and it made her more human to me. And I liked how it also didn't start actually with her birth. It started with her parents getting married and then her birth, and some of the chapters were on her children as well. There was a great entertaining chapter on her first son Bertie, who became the next king, and how he completely failed at being in a military camp and giving orders to the drill patrol, and it was fascinating. So it was definitely a book that I learnt so much about her as well, and it's very readable. It doesn't feel like you're just being thrown a load of boring facts. It really like fleshes it out, and it is almost at points like reading a novel, because she really, you know, creates this day. You can really imagine it. She puts you in those situations. That was just fantastic. I'm very glad I finally got to this. And then the last physical book I have to talk about before I get on to the audiobooks is Threads by Kate Evans from the Refugee Crisis. This is, okay, it's not a happy book, but it really affected me. I thought it was brilliant. It's about her experiences of going to the jungle refugee camp in Calais, and I like it because at the beginning she talks about how it used to be known for the nuns who made lace. I don't know if you can see that, but you have the image of them kind of weaving in the lace and the walls, and then throughout the book you have these pieces of lace that are kind of like the lines in between the sections, and I just thought it was a really clever idea about history and how they were seen as an invasion, and it's very hard hitting. There were some testimonies that made me cry, I would say that, but it felt like just such an important book, especially because it's so nearby and it's still a crisis that's going on. But anyway, on to a happier book. Then the audiobook I have to talk about is This Green and Pleasant Land by Aisha Malik. I've not read her before, I think, but this was amazing, and it is about Bilal, whose mother on her deathbed asked him to promise to look after his sister and his aunt, which obviously he consents to, but then also to build a mosque in the picturesque Dorset village that he lives in. And he has always really tried to conform. In fact, the parish council that he is on have always called him Bill. So it's a lot about erasure of culture and about foreignness and people's fear of foreignness, and how people aren't always overtly racist, and sometimes it's those subtle things that make it harder to deal with. And it's obviously about the tension of whether or not he can or can't build a mosque, and people objecting to it and claiming it's for reasons like they're trying to preserve their Christian heritage, but then him realising it's not really about that at all. And it's a really wonderful way of looking at the modern problem, or like modern question of what is British identity now, and people being afraid of losing that, and his aunt who comes to stay particularly is interesting because she has very minimal English, so you also have her view of things and people's opinion of her being so much less than people who were first generation and then second generation immigrants, and it was very well done, and the ending was really satisfying, and it's really like touching. I just thought it was a very modern issue and a really wonderful way to look at it, but it was also really funny and entertaining, so it was just such a well balanced book. I highly recommend it. And then on to the lows. So the first book I have to talk about is Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence. Oh dear. this was bad. This is about Connie, whose husband cannot sexually perform, let's put it that way, because he's paralysed. So she is not having the best time, shall we say, in her marriage, which is understandable. But all the men are terrible in this, to the point that the gamekeeper Mellors, this is not really a spoiler, who she has an affair with, is such a stereotypical working class, chip on his shoulder about the upper class character, that it just feels really lazy. And also, I understand that he's trying to do something there and trying to examine class and that kind of thing, but it just feels as like he's trying to be really philosophical, but it comes up as pretentious. And there are just so many references to breasts in this. Like, what is the fascination with them? But the way they're described is really weird. Like, he says he likes to make them swing like bells. What is sexy about that? I mean, and just, there's so many things I could say. But also the ending is really dissatisfying. I know it's obviously a deliberate choice, but nothing is really resolved, and it's just, it left me feeling like, well, what was the point of that? It's a few hours of my life will never get back. So if I hadn't listened to this in audiobook with Samantha Bond, who was the lovely narrator, I think I would have given up on it. Also, it was actually probably one of the most explicit books I've ever read, which is really odd, because I thought, I don't know why, my naivety, I thought there was only one sex scene. But no, there's a lot of hanky-panky in this, and that's not what I had a problem with, but the way it was written was really bad, and it just felt a bit problematic at points. Like the first time, one of the times she has sex with with a man, like, she's basically asleep, she is unconscious, there is not really consent in this. It's a sticky book, and I'm gonna wait till I read another book by him, that's all I'm gonna say. And the other book that was disappointment was Brave New World by Aldous, I always want to call him Adolphus, he's not called Adolphus, Huxley, which is quite famous. It's a dystopian novel that predated 1984 by I think about like 15 years, something like that. I think it was published in 1932, I think, I want to say 1984 came out in 1946, but that could be wrong. Anyway, it is set in a dystopian world, and the world is called the world state. Everyone is meant to be very unemotional. Children are conditioned to not be emotional or form any kind of long-term connections, and individuality is also really quashed. So they're literally made and like born outside of the womb. So that idea of nurture is eradicated, and they are also born into a certain class. So Alpha is the top one. I can't remember what the name is. It begins with E for the bottom one, but they are just set from birth as that class. So as a concept, that sounds quite interesting, but I just felt the execution was really boring, and you follow an alpha character. Oh my gosh, what's his name? Oh wait, I wrote it down. What's his name? His name is Bernard Marx, there we go. And he has a love interest called Lenina. I don't like that name. Well, that's not the problem with the book. But anyway, and it's sort of him, them uncovering secrets of the director of this world, and disrupting the world in general, I guess. But I just did not feel any kind of threat or emotional connection, whereas in 1984 I really did. I really cared about the protagonist, and it was just interesting to sort of see that genre emerging, but it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, and 1984 was just so much better. Although I should reread that because it's been so long, I don't know if I would like it as much as I remember it liking it, but it's a shame because I think it could have been great, and it was just a missed opportunity. But there we go, that's the highs and the lows, bit scatty as usual, but I don't think I've, badly mispronounced someone's name, apart from wanting to call Aldous Adolphus. But what did you read in April? Have you read any of these books? Let me know, and I will see you soon for Bookish Shenanigans. Bye!